The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Chip Lindsey is the new offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Because now we need to talk about Chip Lindsey, the most recently North Carolina offensive coordinator. He has got an extensive track record. He's 50 years old. He brings a lot to the table. The more I dig into him, the more I like him. He brings kind of the same type of stuff that I liked from Joe Craddock. Now, credit to Steve Dace, who has been beating the drum over Chip Lindsey the last several days. To me, I know there were people on the message boards that were like, do not want. But if you look into what he has done, I don't see how you could look at it that way. He has had some absolutely prolific offenses. He has a similar philosophy as Joe Craddock in the idea that he wants to fit players to the scheme to the players rather than the players to the scheme. He's had just some really good production. Maybe not the most, not necessarily the most prolific recruiter, but he's a guy that's worked his way up. He started in high school football starting in 1997. He was doing high school football all the way to 2009 before he got, so that's 12 years at the high school level. He had assistant for the first, 7 years, then gets a head coach job for 2 years, offensive coordinator for another year, and of course my article is just going to be annoying here and just keep on reformatting to something that's unreadable. Anyway, let's see if I can just do this way. If I do it this way, it won't do that. All right, this will work. Hopefully you can read my article because it's the pain that it keeps on wanting to reformat to something that's unreadable. So he got his start in Alabama. He's from Alabama. He was a wide receiver at a small school in Alabama. I can't remember offhand. I'm not looking it up right now. Probably should have put that in the article. I did not. But he was a head coach twice in high school football, but started off as an assistant, had an offensive coordinator job in high school football before he became the Troy quarterbacks coach for 1 year. And then he went back to high school football for 2 years. Okay. He's a teacher because that's kind of how it works when you're a high school coach and everything. So that means like he loves to teach from what I've read. That's really good in terms of teaching the game and development, all of that stuff, especially a Bryce Underwood, who is a sponge, according to Connor Stallions. Lots of great stuff coming out of that. Then he went back to high school. He was an offensive assistant at Auburn, and then he ended up moving around, right? He went from being an offensive assistant at Auburn to being an offensive coordinator, which is what he has been, offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach everywhere he's been, except for when he was the head coach of Troy from 2019 to 21. Not a great tenure there, 15 and 21. Troy's a hard place to play and win. I know that the year before he took over Troy, I think upset LSU. And maybe that was 2 years before. I'm not sure the timeline there, but nothing really doing as far as that's concerned. And then he left there. He was at UCF for a year under Gus Malzahn, reuniting with Gus Malzahn, and North Carolina the last 2 years under Mack Brown. So he's worked with Drake May. He didn't develop Drake May, but he worked with him. That's always a very good thing to be able to put a guy in the first round of the draft as he had. Drake May would have obviously been that, but still, he's worked with a lot of really good talent. He recruited Bo Nix to Auburn. He left Auburn before he got there. His best year of recruiting was that Auburn 2019 class. But there's just a lot to like about what he has done in his tenure. Lots of different players that you look at. I think one of the more impressive ones, there's a name that you know, Tez Johnson from Oregon. Well, he got his start at Troy starting in 2020, and he was pretty prolific in 2021. And in 2022, he was just a smidge better by 100 yards. And then he transferred to Oregon the past 2 years. So he's the one who found him out of Pinson Valley, Alabama. Most of his recruiting footprint is in Alabama and Georgia. So if even though he's not a prolific recruiter, he's not a guy that you're going to write home about necessarily. Basically, you look at his all-time recruiting list, it's like Alabama. Okay, so he's got a lot going there. But he's got a ton of experience. He's had as an offensive coordinator in college, this is his 6th job doing that, coaching offensive coordinator and quarterbacks together. So that now kind of makes sense in terms of what he's going to bring to the table as far as that goes. As far as scheme, he comes from like an air raid type. He started with wing T and air raid in high school. And then he's worked under Todd Monken at Southern Mississippi and Gus Malzahn at Auburn and UCF. He comes from that school. So he's a guy he's going to smash, right? He's going to run. He's also going to throw. He likes to mix a lot of these kind of pro spread type things, getting the ball in the hands of guys that are going to be able to go downfield. There's just a lot that you're going to like about him. As far as what he's able to do production wise, he's had some really good years. But before I even get to that, I want to talk about what he said here. This is I got this from Inside Carolina, 24/7 I think site for North Carolina. He said this: the concepts are the concepts, and it doesn't really matter what you call them. But I think if I had to describe myself, it would be that we're going to build the offense around the player strengths of who we have. Obviously, we've got Drake May, so the passing game is going to be heavily involved, and we're going to do the same stuff that they've done here. But my goal is for us to be able to run the ball a little bit better when we want to run it and continue to marry up the things that I think fit our personnel, even in the run scheme. He tends to be more of a zone guy, but he's shown that he'll run gap schemes as well. So it's all kind of going to be able to marry itself together. He's able to take all of these different coaches he's worked under, and now he's going to be under Sharon Moore, who obviously he comes from various schools, Bob Stoops and Charlie Strong. Wait, no, not Charlie Strong. Wait, who was he under? Who was Sharon Moore under at Louisville? I think it was Charlie Strong. Don't remember. But he's obviously Sharon's mostly been the protege of Jim Harbaugh. Okay. So he's able to kind of, I would imagine you're going to see a marriage of the pro spread, and you're still going to see a lot of running the football because he's shown that he can run the football very effectively for a guy that's had Drake May, for a guy who's had some pretty good quarterbacks, Jarrett Stidham at Auburn. I think that he's actually going to be in a position where you feel like, okay, maybe you want to pass more than you've done. So the best year in terms of production for Chip Lindsey came in 2022 when he was at UCF. There he had a heck of a quarterback's room. I'll be interested to see because 2 of those quarterbacks that he had that year are in the transfer portal right now. Michigan wants an established quarterback. Well, his main quarterback was John Reese Plumlee, so he was at UCF the year after Dillon Gabriel was there. But he had John Reese Plumlee, who was very, very good. But he also had Mikey Keene, who you saw earlier this year with Fresno State, and Thomas Castellanos, who is at Boston College, and a lot of people are looking at him as one of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal. Both of them are in the transfer portal, if memory serves. But that was his best year offensively in terms of total yards. 2022 was a heck of a year for big offenses. So UCF was 16th with 6,574 yards in that season. They played 14 games just like Michigan has played at least 14 games in each of the last several years. But that's better than any Michigan team. You think back to 2022 when Michigan's offense was rocking and rolling. That was the best year in the last 4. Michigan had 6,423 yards. And Michigan ran more than it passed, 3,345 rushing yards and 3,078 passing yards by J.J. McCarthy. It went the other way just slightly for John Reese Plumlee and those guys at UCF. 3,337 passing yards. That would be enough to break the Michigan single season passing record if it's one guy. And 3,197 rushing yards. So, okay, here's the thing. He's got multiple seasons too. 2022 at UCF and 2017 at Auburn, where he's eclipsed 3,000 rushing yards and 3,000 passing yards. That's very, very good. Michigan had 1 or 2 years in 2021 and 2022 where they did that. And 24th ranked offense both years. So getting Michigan back to that balance, right? Because you look at what Michigan was this year. It was 35-31 in total yards. Almost 2,000 rushing yards, another game to go. They should get there, but only 1,603 in terms of passing yards, okay? That is abysmal, obviously. We know that. But in terms of, he's never had, I should say 1 year he's had a worse rushing season, but he's never had a sub 2,800 passing season since 2016 in terms of being the offensive coordinator. I didn't include Troy there. It's a little bit different because he was running the whole show. He has his own offensive coordinator, all that stuff. But so UCF, that was his best year. North Carolina 2 years ago with Drake May was 7th in the country with 6,386 in terms of overall yards, passed for just shy of 4,000, 3,889, rushed for just 3 yards shy of 2,500. Auburn with Jarrett Stidham and Kerryon Johnson. Lions fans know Kerryon Johnson. 2017 had the 26th offense, 6,323 yards total, 3,267 in terms of passing, and 3,056 in terms of rushing. And then I just want to get to last year, this year, actually, North Carolina, 37th offensively, and certainly defensively, it's been an issue more so. 2807 in terms of passing and 2274 in terms of rushing. Still rushed better than Michigan did this year. So
get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You're going to want to check out some lines from Monday Night Football. The Bengals favored by 5.5 at Jerry World over the Cowboys. I have to start Cooper Rush in fantasy. The Simpsons broadcast is looking at some high-scoring football and has the total 49.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Nebraska has a new defensive coordinator. And
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast.
big breaking news on Tuesday afternoon out of Lincoln. John Butler is the defensive coordinator of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It is permanent. Well, someday he won't be the defensive coordinator of the Nebraska football team, but he is right now, and he will be for the bowl game, and he will be in the 2025 season. And Nebraska is getting close to making a pair of additional hires on the defensive side. Phil Snow, who was Matt Rule's longtime defensive coordinator while at Baylor, while with the Carolina Panthers. 68-year-old Phil Snow set to join the team. They are working toward that as associate head coach. And then you have Terry Braden, who is in his mid-30s, last 8 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is set to become, if this works out, it's trending in this direction, according to a highly placed team source, to become the Nebraska defensive line coach. So this is it. Nebraska's got its coaching staff. How about that? December 10th.
Well, I think people were, I don't know if they were on edge about this. It was, anybody had asked me over the last couple of weeks, they were like, well, what do you think they're going to do? You know, what are they doing? The first one was the defensive coordinator. And I told them every time, I said, I think they're going to elevate Butler. I think they're going to hire Butler. And, you know, that's sort of the way it turned out. As far as the timing of it, I think you have to sort of like, you have to piece it all. It's a big puzzle. It's not just one piece, move it there, and then you build around that. Like, no, it's a big puzzle and it all has to fit together. And I think, you know, Phil Snow factors into that equation a little bit as well. So I think he's thinking about the big picture. And frankly, what was the rush? You know, so Nebraska doesn't play a bowl game for more than 2 weeks now, and that whole thing is, you know, who's going to be on the roster and who's going to be doing what is totally in flux, and it was going to be no matter what. So it's an interesting move, but not a particularly surprising one to me.
Do you think it's coincidental that the staff came together on the day after the transfer portal opened?
Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So while there wasn't a rush as far as getting the pieces together in order to coach a football game, I do think there was a rush and there was some urgency. And this is confirmation of that. There was a rush to do this in time to have coaches in place when portal prospects are visiting Nebraska here in the mid portion of December, that they will be able to speak with their position coaches, that they will be able to speak with their coordinators. Let's just reset this. Since the end of the regular season, Tony White and Terrence Knighton have left to go to Florida State. Garrett McGuire has left to go to Texas Tech. Nebraska elevated Dana Holgerson, from an interim offensive coordinator to permanent offensive coordinator and hired Da'Keel Shorts, his former receiver and receivers coach from Kentucky, to be the Nebraska receivers coach. Now on the defensive side, you've got John Butler, elevated once from secondary coach to interim DC, now to permanent DC. Phil Snow, brought in from the outside, and Terry Braden, brought in from the NFL. This is a lot of stuff that's happened since Black Friday or the Monday after Black Friday.
Yeah, it is. It's a big turnover, and I think, especially when you think about the defensive staff, who, with Tony White, with Pot Roast, Terrence Knighton, and then even Evan Cooper, who wasn't with Nebraska this past year.
Yeah, I forgot about Phil Simpson. He was brought in too.
Phil Simpson is another name, and we put him on the side there too. So it's a big turnover, and so there was just a big glaring hole on that defensive side of the ball, and to go along with the coaches. I mean, they've lost some key parts of their defense too, or parts of their defense anyway. So Nebraska has to figure out a way to kind of build that thing back. They both need long-term guys that they could have on their roster in 25, 26, 27. But also they need immediate impact guys as well. And it's hard to do that if they're committing to a place where they don't know who the defensive coordinator is going to be. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And now you could kind of see the vision. You could see how Matt Rule sets it up on both sides of the ball. It's definitely different than it was before. There's no doubt about that.
So I'm interested, and we'll learn this in the coming days. Matt Rule's going to speak to the media on Thursday, and he'll have some things to say about the way that this defensive staff is going to be structured. But it would seem, because there isn't a secondary coach outside of John Butler, that he'll do the majority of the work with the secondary while coordinating the defense. Now, I would expect that they're going to have somebody else there. Like he'll have a safeties coach or a corners coach or an assistant secondary coach, something of that nature. You have two coaches to work with the linebackers in Rob Dvoracek and the aforementioned Phil Simpson, who was at Nebraska in 2023 and then spent the 2024 season at Florida State as an analyst. And then you have Braden to work with the players up front. So does this lend itself to a 3-3-5? Does it lend itself to something that's more multiple? Nebraska was pretty multiple over the last two seasons with Tony White. Could they be going to a 4-3 or a 3-4? I wondered about the 3-4 when I saw Simpson come in as the outside linebackers coach, because Nebraska has just one outside linebacker in its 3-3-5 setup. So I think we're going to get a sense here in the near future of what kind of a scheme Nebraska wants to run. And I don't know if it's as simple as saying, well, the last time we heard from Matt Rule about this, he said he loved the 3-3-5 and didn't want to change from that. I think there's going to be some change, but will it be significant enough to change the name of the base scheme? I don't know.
I wonder what Phil Snow's impact here is going to be. It's it's something that we could discuss in further depth as we go on throughout the show here. But I'm just, because if you can't tell, this is sort of off the riff. We just kind of got this a little while ago and decided to show up for a pod.
We want to bring you the reaction.
Yeah, we want to bring you the reaction. So I'm thinking all right, Phil Snow is a longtime trusted Rule, kind of a right-hand man. He's been with him at every stop. John Butler just came here last year. John Butler's the guy with the defensive coordinator tag on him. Phil Snow is the associate head coach. We know that the offense is Dana Holgerson's, right? Yeah. So yeah. What does that make the defense? It's Rule, it's Snow, it's Butler. It'll be interesting to see what that kind of feels like.
I think something that happened in the past few days, and this could have been the reason that we didn't hear an announcement like this on signing day, is everybody had to get comfortable with this arrangement. Phil Snow had to be comfortable with the arrangement. He's not coming in here to be a recruiter. It's like a mentoring kind of role. I think he's going to be there for Matt Rule. I think he's going to be there for John Butler. I think he could potentially be there to help Holgerson. Rule has upped the experience level on his staff with the addition of Holgerson and Phil Snow 3, 4, 5-fold in the last month on the job. So one thing that Nebraska is not going to lack, and Rule said that he felt at times during the 23 and first 2/3 of the 24 season that he didn't necessarily have the kind of sounding board that he felt like would be beneficial, and that Dana Holgorsen was a benefactor for him, was a benefit for him, and that Holgorsen was this sounding board kind of person because of his own head coaching experience. Well, Phil Snow at age 68 with his experience is absolutely a sounding board for Matt Rule and for John Butler. Looking at Phil Snow's history and what he's coached, in addition to being a DC, and he was the DC at Temple and safeties coach. At Baylor, he was a walk-around DC and safeties coach in 2019, walk-around in 17 and 18. With the Panthers, just a defensive coordinator. Prior to that, he coached for the Detroit Lions as a linebackers coach. He coached for Washington in the NFL as a safeties coach, Washington in the NFL as a corners coach, UCLA as a safeties coach. So you can kind of see where this is going. Most of his experience is in the secondary, and I imagine he's going to be one of those coaches who's helping John Butler not just coordinate the defense, but work day to day with the guys on the back end of that defensive group.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Dillon Gabriel, Heisman finalist. And
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
Let's start with Dillon Gabriel, the man of the hour, outside of perhaps Nico Reed. But you have to go to Dillon Gabriel first with how he played in that Big Ten championship game. He should get some sort of nickname, moniker. Maybe we can come up with one together, Ducks fans. Big Game Dillon. His best performances this year have come against the best defenses Oregon has faced. Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. No Tez Johnson against Michigan, 297, 2 touchdowns. Ohio State, 300 and whatever it was, and a couple touchdowns. And Penn State, top 5 defense in college football, 280 and 4 touchdowns. I mean, the guy has been absolute nails, and he's a Heisman Trophy finalist this year. Second straight season that he is, or that Oregon rather, is going to have a representative as a Heisman Trophy finalist. Here's why it doesn't matter. He's not going to win the award. I think it's great that he's there, rewarding him for having a fantastic season, leading Oregon to a 13-0 mark. That historically has been a huge part of the Heisman Trophy award. It's, hey, you're the best player or the most important player on the best team. You're going to get represented in New York. We've seen that quite a bit. It doesn't matter, though, in the sense that he's not going to win the award. This will not happen. I can guarantee you. And you know what? Whether or not I think it should happen, that's irrelevant. I wouldn't vote for him number one to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Guess what? That's not why this matters. 2 thoughts. Number one, the one thing that Oregon fans care about the most is, can Oregon win a national championship with this guy? And I said coming into this year, yes, he can do that. And we have seen throughout this season, yes, he can do that. He's gone up against some of the best defenses in college football and played really, really well. He has been doing a lot of things right. He has cleaned up mistakes that he was making earlier in the season. I think he has done in so many ways. There was a story on the broadcast, which I have thoughts on later on today's show, because obviously I was at the game, so I hadn't heard it until I watched it earlier today. There was a story about how he and Terrence Ferguson got so close, they're now going to be in each other's weddings. That's a short time period to get that close, but they're best buds now. Those leadership qualities, you can't put a point value on that. Vegas isn't going to value it into its point spread calculation, but it absolutely means something. So I'm glad he's getting this sort of recognition, because he's had an awesome year, and he has been, even though it's his last season of college football, he's been an awesome leader for the Ducks and a great quarterback. 3 games left. That's what we hope he's got left in his college football career. 3 football games. That's the idea here. So that's the first reason that it does matter, but doesn't matter, if you know what I mean. Secondly, how big of a recruiting tool is something like this? We saw LSU last year goose Jaden Daniels' stats to get the Heisman Trophy. And if Oregon had beaten Washington in the Pac-12 title game, Bo Nix probably wins it. But instead, it was Jaden Daniels. His numbers were incredible. 3,000 or 4,000 yard passer, wherever he was, 1,000 yard rusher. Like, he had a crazy good and productive season. Do you know why LSU made that push? Because they know the value of having a Heisman Trophy winner pays off on the recruiting trail. How is Oregon doing in the quarterback recruiting department right now? Oh, that's right, exceptionally well. Why? Because they keep churning out high-level guys at the position. 3 years in a row, a quarterback with a 70-plus completion percentage. That guy, Bo Nix, who is Tez's brother, not sure if you knew that, is now crushing it on Sundays. And Justin Herbert is crushing it on Sundays. Now Dillon Gabriel is a Heisman finalist. All of these things, that I think is far more important for Oregon to get Dillon Gabriel into that spot than Gabriel getting there with a chance to win the Heisman Trophy. Because as I said, he will not get over Travis Hunter, who's going to win the award. And if by some miracle that doesn't happen, it's not going to Gabriel. It will go to Ashton Jeanty because he's had also an insane season and has led Boise to the playoff. And I think this is something I talked about coming into the season. Story-wise, it wasn't going to be there because there are big expectations for this Oregon team. They've lived up to them. And that's great. And they're living up to him being 13-0. That's why he's there or going to be there in New York City. But that doesn't resonate with the country and with Heisman voters the way Ashton Jeanty leading Mighty Mouse at Boise State into the college football playoff, right? The G5 team that's there, or Travis Hunter doing something that we haven't seen before at this level in college football. So that's why it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And it helps. And it's great. Just don't have the expectation he's going to win the award. He won't. But the one thing that he can win, a national championship, very much in his sights. So I want to talk about how well he played on Saturday. That Penn State defense is no joke. That is an Ohio State level defense that he went up against, and he was awesome. Oregon ran the ball really well. They were in that 170, 180 range or so, and I said going into the game, hey, if they do that, I think the offense rolls. And we've seen throughout the year, this Oregon offense is at its best when the run game is doing more than being just all right. When they're not, 110, 120, but they're more like 160, 78 in that sort of range. Whittington had some really good runs. Jordan James was good. The offensive line was fantastic. But Dillon Gabriel was absolutely phenomenal. And that's not to say every throw he made was perfect or every read he made is perfect. It wasn't. Throws at or behind the line of scrimmage, I was grateful that they didn't get returned for touchdowns. It felt inevitable at one point. That's something for the Oregon offense to work on in this long layoff going into January 1st in the Rose Bowl against the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State. That game is in Columbus. But situationally, Dillon Gabriel was awesome. When Oregon went down the field on that final touchdown drive, they converted a couple third downs, they converted a fourth down, and it all came on the left arm of Dillon Gabriel. And his ability to remain patient in the pocket, even though it's not as easy for him to see back there as it is for a Bo Nix or a Justin Herbert. He can't just survey and look over the line. It's harder for him to get throws off, but he makes it happen anyway. The guy's just a gamer. And I thought he did a great job not forcing the ball down the field. The most dangerous throws that he had in that game were those screen passes that Penn State was jumping. And I have more thoughts on that that I'll share in the third segment, thoughts from the rewatch, because I didn't always love that. But again, focusing on Dillon Gabriel here. He was every bit as good as you think he was in your head. Situationally, he was awesome. Down in the red zone, absolute nails. Remember the red zone problems? We haven't seen that in quite a while. And that's kind of been the only thing he hasn't consistently done well, and he was absolutely perfect. So the way that he hangs in the pocket, the anticipation he throws the football with, the way he's diagnosing the defenses, he's playing at a national championship level. It's not going to be at a Heisman level. And I think if you compare his numbers over the course of the season to past Heisman winning quarterbacks, he's not even close. That's another reason he's not going to win. His numbers aren't even close. But that's not what Oregon needs, and I don't think that's what Dillon Gabriel's focused on. I'm glad he's getting the recognition to go to New York City because he's been even better than his numbers indicate this year, especially in that Penn State game. Didn't even have 300 yards passing. But could Oregon's offense have been any better? Not really. And he makes the play at the end to get the first down and ice the game. Like, everything about him situationally as a whole in the game and in key particular moments, he was as good as Oregon could have hoped for. And he has been just phenomenal, and he deserves his flowers. He had a bunch of flowers around his neck after the game. Absolutely earned him in this one.